Casinos make billions every year. One night at the Mirage in Las Vegas, a woman cashed out $800,000 and then simply disappeared. That is the kind of sentence that makes people email insiders and former employees, and that makes surveillance operators clear their schedules. Insiders have handed over logs, maintenance notes, and fragmentary interviews for this investigation. By the end of this video, you will know 9 specific machines that kept turning up in those logs, what made each one unusual from a technical and human point of view, the stories that followed each payout, and why gaming regulators and the House had to act. Now we move through machine number 1 and on to 8 others, each paired with an inside story, and we will return to the woman who won $800,000 at the end and explain how it all tied together. Listen as former floor staff, a slot technician, and a surveillance operator explain what happened, and wait until you hear what the surveillance tapes show. Machine number 1 was called Mirage Monarch, a game with stacked symbols and a deceptively generous bonus trigger. Its mechanics were simple on paper, a high hit frequency, though moderate volatility, producing small wins and occasional big payouts when the stacked symbols aligned. The slot technician Rajiv, who worked maintenance at the Mirage for 4 years, described the machine in a way that made engineers nod. He said, the RTP on paper was listed as fair, but the back-end tracking told a more complicated story. The surveillance operator Priya replied, I remember the session. Her chair was sticky from spilled Diet Cola. The sound of coins was quieter because it was ticket out, but the monitor showed a spike in bonus triggers. Rajid answered, we saw an error log that night. A firmware reset had occurred during a bonus sequence. That never happens randomly. Priya asked, who signed the reset? Rajiv paused and said, no one authorized it from the floor. It had to be someone with back-end access. Priya then told the floor manager Carlos, we will pull camera feed. Carlos replied, pull everything. If there was an unauthorized access, we need names. That exchange went on for several minutes while a crowd gathered and the comp buffet staff glanced over. Sensory details stick in memory. The casino smelled of fried oil and cleaner. Lights blinked in warm gold. Voices hummed like bees. The chair leather creaked under her weight. The button had a faintly sticky texture, and the printer crackled when the ticket printed. The consequence was immediate. The House moved the Mirage Monarch to another bank the next morning and flagged it for a software audit. But wait until you hear what happened with machine number 2. Machine number 2 was called Desert Queen, a progressive jackpot title with colossal reels and a progressive ladder that could in theory pay out huge sums to a lucky line. Its volatility was high, and its bonus mechanics cost the House little if rarely activated. Floor host Anita remembered a player community online who coordinated sessions at this title, trading times and positions on the floor like chess moves. A player named Linda appears in the story again, and her backstory matters here. Her friends described her as methodical, someone who tracked hit frequency across sessions and who posted times in player forum threads. In an exchange recorded by a former player moderator, Tom, who later became a whistleblower, Tom told Linda, people are seeing runs at 2 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. We need timestamps. Linda answered, I will sit and note every spin. Tom said, bring receipts, bring images. Linda answered, I will bring everything and meet you at the East Bank. That coordination showed the casino a pattern on the Desert Queen that suggested a hot section had formed and that players were migrating to exploit perceived streaks. The casino reacted by redistributing the machines and changing the comp Buffett incentives to break the social coordination. Machine number 3 was Neon Nile, known for a generous bonus feature and stacked symbols that created long stretches of near misses. The feature had a bonus trigger with a complex probability curve that looked generous to players but actually hid a lower progressive contribution. Surveillance operator Priya again described the night of the big win in detail. She said, the feed shows her at 5:32 in the afternoon. She was talking quietly on the phone. There was smoke from someone lighting a cigarette at the corner. Security head Michael leaned over and said, I saw the crowd. People were whispering. Priya spoke. Her session lasted 3 hours. At 2 points, a man in a dark cap came and stood behind her for a long time.
Michael replied, "We pulled the Catman into a room for questioning." Priya countered, "He had no ID and left before we could get his name." Michael said, "That is a problem in itself." Priya finished, "The way the reels lined up at 7 minutes to closing was odd." The dialogue continued with exchanges about camera angles and timestamps until Michael authorized a full review. Scent and tactile details return in these retellings. The carpet underfoot had a slightly damp smell from cleaning. The slot button felt colder than the surrounding armrest. The ticket stock had a rough edge that scraped the finger. The bonus bell had a particular chime that still rings in Rajiv's memory. And the cafeteria coffee tasted burnt that night. The consequence of Neon Nile was a formal logging change and additional surveillance coverage for every machine with stacked symbols. Before moving on, a short backstory of the woman who won is essential and compact. The first paragraph of her past was that she was in her late 50s, a retired school administrator from Ohio who moved to Las Vegas 2 years earlier to be near a daughter. She had worked audits for decades and took pleasure in tracking numbers. The second paragraph noted that she had an affinity for pattern games and learned to read hit frequency charts on player forums. The third paragraph described a marital rupture 5 years earlier that left her cautious with money but curious about systems and probabilities. These 3 short paragraphs explain her motive and what made her skill set unusual inside a casino. Machine number 4 was Silver Lotus, a low-volatility game with a generous free spins mechanic that tended to create long stretches of engagement from casual players. The house edge on paper was modest, but the game had a known issue with its bonus trigger logic that made occasional clusters appear more often than expected, a fact that leaked into player forum threads. The former floor manager Carlos and a gaming commission investigator named Javier spoke about a whale who liked Silver Lotus. Carlos said, "He played all night. We gave him a comp buffet, a suite for a month." Javier asked, "Did you track his ROI?" Carlos replied, "We did, but then the logs were incomplete." Javier said, "Incomplete logs are a red flag." Carlos said, "We archived them and archived the seat for privacy." The casino faced a complaint and a small fine that prompted policy changes about logging and archival. Machine number 5 was Lady Luck Mirage, a tight loose machine known colloquially as a lose leader that pulled people into the bank with its bright graphics and a loot box style bonus. It was mathematically simple yet psychologically potent. A slot attendant named Vinod recalled cleaning the cup holders on that bank and overhearing players swear they had a system. Vinod said they would come in pairs. One would distract, and the other would tap the button at just the right moment. Vinod described the sound of nervous laughter, the metallic clink of coins that had been converted to a ticket, the warm breath of excited players, and the electric buzz of the lights. The casino removed Lady Luck Mirage after a whistleblower raised concerns that a maintenance pattern coincided with unusually timed bonus triggers. The legal team reviewed the RNG and found nothing tampered but installed stricter access controls. Machine number 6 was Jackpot Mirage, an older progressive jackpot title with a low reported hit frequency but a sizable progressive pool. It attracted single players hoping for life-changing wins. A player named Priya from a forum told the story of being told by another regular, "This machine eats coins and spits out stories." The slot technician, Rajiv, explained the hardware scent that comes with decades of operation, the faint electrical ozone from overloaded boards, the worn plastic on buttons, and the humidity in the back room where the boards were stored. The casino used ambient noise and small adjustments in bank layout as strategies to manage psychological behavior. The result was a reallocation of Jackpot Mirage machines to less visible areas and a memo to slot attendants about monitoring prolonged sessions. Machine number 7 was Vegas Vortex, which gained a reputation in local culture for producing long losing streaks followed by sudden large payouts. It created a sense of community among a certain group who called themselves the Vortex Crew and who communicated by name on local player forum threads. Names matter here. The Vortex Crew included players called Sheila, Marcus, Eddie, and Gloria. They would congregate at midnight and swap stories and coffee from the comp buffet when it opened. Floor host Anita recalled they were tribal about their spots. That loyalty cost the house in migration of players and revenue concentration. The casino responded by introducing loyalty rewards that dispersed value across machines to weaken the group effect. Now the CTA for comments roughly a third of the way through. We want to hear from you, and your details matter. Pause a moment, and if you have ever seen a machine behave like any of these, tell us where it happened. Start your comment with the city, give the machine name if you remember it, and a short note about what you felt was odd. Did a group coordinate play? Was there a suspicious maintenance visit at night? Your comment helps build a map of patterns and can prompt follow-up investigations and videos. We read every comment and use them to contact local former employees and regulators for verification. This community of players and insiders has led to 2 separate regulatory complaints in the past year alone. By sharing, you could prompt another review and help someone understand how houses manage hot sections. Thank you for contributing, and now back to the next case. Machine number 8 was Colossal Sultan, a title with truly colossal reels and a spectacle-style bonus intended to keep eyes on screens and feet in chairs. Its technical complexity made it an outlier and sometimes a maintenance headache. A long dialogue between Rajiv and the general manager Tom revealed how software complexity can create blind spots. Rajiv said, "The real mapping is not linear. It uses a seeded pseudo-random that interacts oddly with the bonus trigger. You can get correlated symbols across columns." Tom said, "Are you saying it is exploitable?" Rajiv replied, "Not directly, but it creates visual patterns that players mistake for predictability." Tom asked, "Did we see a cluster of payouts?" Rajiv answered, "Yes, 2 clusters in a single month. One coincided with a software update." Tom responded, "Who pushed the update late at night?" Rajiv said, "An external vendor. We have minimal logs for that window." Tom concluded, "We will get their server logs and run a checksum audit." The dialogue ended with Tom authorizing a lab analysis and with the slot technician smelling the dust and hot plastic of the cabinet as he unplugged boards. Sensory impressions are vivid here. The hum of cooling fans, the dry smell of heated plastic, the pressed fabric of chairs, the taste of stale
peanuts from the snack stand, the tightness of the crowd. The consequence was that Colossal Sultan units were temporarily switched to offline diagnostic mode, and inventories were cross-checked with vendor logs. Machine number 9 was called Kronos Tower, and it was the machine most directly tied to the 800,000 payout. Kronos Tower used a combination of progressive jackpot mechanics and time-based bonus triggers that produced clustering when certain conditions aligned. The woman had sat at Kronos Tower when the jackpot ladder blew past a number that had not been reached in months. Surveillance footage analyzed by Javier the investigator showed a pattern of 3 people interrupting her line of sight over a 2-hour period. A dialogue between surveillance staff, Priya and Carlos, revealed a deeper problem. Priya said, "There were shadowed reflections in camera 8. They are not visible in camera 4. Carlos asked, "Why not?" Priya said, "Camera 8's firmware had a time zone mismatch. Its logs show a gap of 13 minutes. Carlos replied, 13 minutes during the bonus sequence is critical. Priya answered, "Exactly. During the gap, she hit the top step of the progressive." Carlos said, "We need a forensic pull of that camera and any maintenance entries for that period." Priya concluded, "I pulled night maintenance logs and found an entry by an unknown user who used a vendor credential. That unknown user is the thread that tied the disappearance to a broader concern. The night the 800,000 ticket printed, the woman walked out with a small coin purse and a folded ticket. Witnesses described her voice as calm. A player named Gloria said, "She looked stunned and happy and then just walked." The security reports later noted that she never returned to the hotel room listed on her club account, and that her phone pinged a tower on the strip and then nothing. This is a moment of tension, and it expands into memories and choices. The security footage blended with audio of the casino, the sound of her footsteps on the marble, the light of the exit that felt almost too bright. The internal conflict inside the surveillance team was palpable. They had to decide whether to release footage publicly and risk violating privacy rules, or to hand it to the Gaming Commission and risk litigation.
That decision lasted several hours, and in the end, the footage was partially redacted and handed over. Moment of tension 2 came when the vendor responded to subpoenas and produced logs that contradicted the casino's archive by 7 minutes. The Gaming Commission investigator Javier said, 7 minutes can mean a lot in probability space. The vendor replied, our server shows synchronization errors during that period. Javier asked, who authorized vendor access inside the network at that hour? The vendor answered, a third-party consultant used a temp credential. Javier said, provide us with the temp credential and the name. The vendor then stalled. This stall created pressure on the casino to. A third moment of tension was when a witness who had promised to come forward changed their mind after a private meeting at the staff entrance. The witness called Anita and said, I cannot talk anymore. Anita asked, why? The witness answered, I was threatened. Anita replied, we will get you protection. The witness remained silent. That silence complicated the case and raised questions about influences outside the casino. The fourth tension moment was legal. The Gaming Commission considered a notice of potential negligence for failing to protect a big winner. The casino sought legal counsel, and the lawyers argued that the casino had surveillance protocols but not absolute guarantees. The commission then insisted on stricter access control and vendor accreditation. Consequences across the 9 machines were consistent. Common responses from casinos included moving machines between banks, reassigning loyalty benefits to change player flows, tightening vendor credentials, adding redundancy in surveillance, and improving logging. Each case taught the house how social behavior, mechanical quirks, and vendor access can combine to produce outsized outcomes. Insiders repeated the same vocabulary when they explained these mechanics. RTP and hit frequency matter, but so do bonus trigger timing, stacked symbols, and progressive jackpot architecture. The house edge can be small on an individual spin, yet large when the bank is managed to produce psychological zones. Former employees repeatedly mentioned comp buffet strategies and staff rotation to break hot sections. There are lessons for players and for regulators. Players should learn the basic mechanics such as volatility and hit frequency and be skeptical of perceived patterns that arise from social coordination. Regulators and casinos should tighten backend tracking and ensure vendor logs are tamper-proof. Before we close, there are 3 moments in this epilogue. Moment 1 is emotional. The woman who vanished is not a statistic. Friends described her as careful, curious, and not prone to wandering. They are left with questions and with a missing presence at family events. The emotional residue of sudden absence reverberates through the gaming community in the months that followed. Moment 2 is analytical. Pulling together logs from 9 machines and the various vendor sources reveals a pattern where late-night access by external parties correlates with anomalous clusters of bonus triggers. The Gaming Commission implemented a policy update requiring signed, time-stamped checks for any firmware change and second-party audit of camera logs. This reduced vendor-introduced risk across the jurisdiction. Moment 3 is practical. For players, knowledge is a protective edge. Understanding RTP, bonus trigger mechanics, and the difference between volatility and hit frequency helps one place bets with eyes open. For casinos, the lesson is that transparency and better logging reduce legal exposure and increase trust in the market. To finish, a short call to action. If you worked on a casino floor, in surveillance, as a slot technician, or as a vendor, and you have documents or a recollection that can help piece together this night, please
come forward in the comments or email the address in the description. If you are a player who has noticed suspicious timing on bonus triggers or firmware resets, tell us the city and machine name and we will follow up. Your input has led to real change before. Recap emotionally. These machines are not just code and lights. They are nodes in social systems where people make choices that ripple. Analytically, the pattern across Mirage, Monarch, Desert Queen, Neon Nile, Silver Lotus, Lady Luck Mirage, Jackpot Mirage, Vegas Vortex, Colossal Sultan, and Kronos Tower shows how technical quirks combined with human behavior can create outsized outcomes. Learn how the casino floor shapes behavior, and remember that knowledge is advantage but also responsibility. Subscribe for more investigative stories where insiders and former employees speak and we follow the paper trail. And share this video with someone who plays regularly. And lastly, remember this line from the surveillance room at the Mirage the night she won $800,000 and disappeared. We track the reels, but not always the people who watch them. Use that thought carefully.